Damn it! Trigger freeze. That was really bad. All right, 10 shots in the brain.
Damn. That was impressive.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's like 2 across the top.
Yeah. So
10.
That's 10, actually.
All right, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about suppressors. Now, first I want to say, of course, I'm up here in the beautiful mountains of Utah recording this video. There is a river running right over here, so if you guys can hear that in the audio, I'm sorry. But anyway, let's get into talking about suppressors. So today I just want to kind of give you guys the basics of suppressors, the basic stuff that they do other than just quiet your gun down, obviously. And really just if you're new to guns and you're finally to the point where you want to take the dive to get a suppressor, because it's unfortunately very difficult to get a suppressor these days. Today I just wanted to give you kind of bugs. Thought that was a spider. So I just wanted to give you guys the basics of what to know about suppressors, about buying suppressors, and about once you have them on your gun and actually using them, what you can expect, things like that. First thing I want to point out is that every suppressor here I have on the table is from Silencer Co. Now, I'm not sponsored by Silencer Co. in any way. They're just a local company here in Utah, and I honestly think that they make some of the best suppressors in the country, and I just want to show them a little love here. I really do like their products. Right here we have a Saker 556K. Now, Silencer Co. does not sell this can to the public anymore, unfortunately. I got my hands on one a while ago. This one is a Velos 762. Velos is Silencer Co.'s flow-through suppressor. I'll explain a little bit more about what that means when we get to this can. This is an Osprey 45. This is a pretty iconic suppressor, probably the most iconic suppressor that Silencer Co. has ever made. The rectangular shape on a pistol can. A lot of games and movies have used this can. And then this is a surprise tool that will help us later. So first of all, what does a suppressor do? Well, obviously it's in the name. It suppresses, it quiets the sound of the muzzle report of your firearm. More specifically, it captures the rapidly expanding gases that come out of the end of your gun when you shoot. When all that gunpowder burns up, it turns into rapidly expanding gas. That's how it sends the bullet downrange. A suppressor is there to capture all that gas as it comes out the end of your barrel, which in turn quiets it down. Now, the very first thing I want to say is that it is not movie quiet. Burb. Hello, Burb. You're not a bird, you're a government spy. You would fly up here while I'm sitting here with a bunch of suppressors and a gun on the table. 100% a government spy. That's not a real bird. Now, I'm going to immediately call out the very iconic scene of John Wick 2 when John Wick and that other guy are shooting at each other in a crowded train station with these tiny little suppressors on their pistols. Of course, that's not realistic at all. In the start of this video, I showed you guys what it sounds like to shoot a 9mm pistol with a suppressor with subsonic ammunition. And it is hearing safe, you can shoot it without hearing protection, but it is still not that quiet. Not quiet enough that you could shoot it in a crowded place without people knowing, obviously. So just an important thing to remember, while suppressors do quiet your gun down, they don't make it that much quieter. They don't make it movie quiet. Alright, so now to show you guys what I have here, this is actually a suppressor that's been cut in half. Now, just in case there's any ATF agents watching this, this is less than half of a suppressor and there is no serial number anywhere on it. So I brought this with me today so that I can actually show you guys what the inside of most suppressors look like, more or less, and give you just a general idea of how they work. So this is probably the most common way that a suppressor is put together and works. This is kind of what I refer to as a baffle stack suppressor. I call it that just because each one of these is called a baffle, and obviously they're stacked together in a certain way. Now, there are other ways to make suppressors. Obviously, there are things like monocore suppressors and flow-through suppressors, and now we're getting into things like 3D printed suppressors, but this is probably the most common, at least up to this point, and probably easiest way to manufacture a suppressor. So just to give you guys a basic idea of how this works, this end would go on the muzzle of your gun. This end is obviously where the bullet comes out. And of course you have this bore down the middle where the actual bullet flies through the suppressor. All right, hold on. Get my handy dandy pointing stick here. Essentially what happens is as this bullet passes through the bore, through the middle of all these basically cones, each one of these cones is pulling gas away from the bullet into the, of course, the rest of the can where it captures it and holds it. That is the basic idea of how every single suppressor works, is it pulls gas away from the bullet as the bullet passes through the suppressor and captures that gas to quiet it down. Now, you'll notice that these baffles don't start right at the end of the suppressor here where the muzzle of the gun would start. There's actually this big open area in front of all of the baffles, and this is a very important part of the suppressor. This is what's known as an expansion chamber, and basically this just gives the gas a chance to expand out away from the bullet right as it leaves the muzzle, so that the gas can be captured more easily by the baffles once the bullet starts passing through the baffles. So that is the basic way that suppressors work. You have an expansion chamber to let the gas expand before it enters the baffles, and then you have some sort of baffle system, whether it looks like this or any other way that it pulls gas away from the bullet as the bullet travels through, and then captures that gas and holds it to quiet down the muzzle report of your gun. Now earlier you will remember I said this is a Silencer Co. Velos suppressor, and I called it a flow-through suppressor. So what does that mean? Well, a flow-through suppressor does the same basic thing of pulling gas away from the bullet as the bullet travels through it. However, the idea behind a flow-through suppressor is that that gas eventually then comes back out of the end of the suppressor. And the reason for this is because with a standard suppressor like this that holds on to the gas, that gas is under very high pressure. So as it goes through these baffles and gets trapped in these little chambers, it still has to go somewhere. So a lot of times what ends up happening if you're shooting a semi-automatic rifle is this gas will then come back up and actually back down the barrel and into the chamber, and will actually go into your face. It's not awful depending on the kind of gun that you're shooting. Like, it's not a health hazard or anything, but it is very noticeable. It is a very powerful smell. It can make your eyes water. Like, it's definitely not a pleasant experience. So the idea behind a flow-through suppressor like this one is that the gas doesn't get actually trapped in the can and force its way back out through the way it came. It actually eventually comes back out the end of the suppressor. I don't know if you guys can see here, but there's actually little holes in the end of this can, and that's where the gas comes back out eventually. But it doesn't let the gas out at the same time as the bullet. There is a lot of different flow-through suppressors on the market, and I think every one of them probably works in a little bit different way, but the general idea is that inside the can there's a bunch of pathways that the gas has to go through back and forth a bunch of times to slow the gas down before it comes out the end of the suppressor again, just so it's not traveling fast enough to be loud when it comes out the end of the suppressor. Alright, so now you guys understand the basics of how suppressors work. Now I want to talk to you a little bit more about actually using the suppressor, having it on your gun, what that is going to look like. Now, of course, this is like getting very nitty-gritty, actually just putting a suppressor on your gun and shooting. It's the same as just shooting a gun normally, but of course quieter. But I'm just super autistic about firearms and I like to talk about this stuff, so we're going to talk about it. So of course suppressors are separated out by caliber. You have a 22 caliber, 30 caliber, 45 caliber, and of course that correlates with whatever you're putting it on, what caliber the gun shoots that you're going to be putting it on. However, that doesn't mean that you have to get the exact same one. Now, of course, if you get a 22 caliber suppressor and put it on a 30 caliber gun, you're going to find out real quick why that's a bad idea. But you can absolutely get a 30 caliber suppressor and put it on a 22 caliber gun, and you'll be just fine. I've done that a lot, actually. In a lot of cases, I like to recommend to people, if you're in a position where you can only get one suppressor, at least for right now, get a 30 caliber suppressor. Even if you're going to put it on a 5.56 gun, get a 30 caliber suppressor, because that gives you a little bit of freedom. because you can still put it on your 5.56 gun and it's still going to sound great. But then you also have the option to put it on a 6.5, a 7.62, 308, anything like that. And now you have one can that you can use for a bunch of different things. Now, there are suppressors out there that are designed to be a widely multi-use can. I actually have one. I didn't bring it with me today. It's a Silencer Co. Hybrid 36M. Silencer Co. also makes a Hybrid 46. If any of you are Tarkov Chads, you know. The idea behind those suppressors is they have a 36 caliber bore or a 46 caliber bore, but they're specifically designed to be used on pretty much anything. You can use them on anything from a 5.56 22 caliber rifle all the way up to like a, with the Hybrid 46, all the way up to like a 45-70 Government. With a Hybrid 36M, you can go all the way up to like 338 Lapua Magnum. Now, of course, if you have the means to get multiple suppressors, having a dedicated suppressor for the caliber that you're shooting through it, like 22 caliber suppressor on a 22 caliber gun, that's going to be the most effective at quieting it down, but it is absolutely not necessary. Squirrels! Y'all lucky I don't have any ammo right now. Hey! What are you doing? Y'all see that squirrel back there?
What the dog doing?
Alright, so now I want to talk about actually mounting a suppressor to your firearm. I know this part on YouTube is a bit of a gray area, actually showing me mounting suppressors. I heard that it was a no-no, and then I heard that it was okay again. I don't really know, but I want to make this video to educate you guys. So in this case, I'll just take the hit if I end up getting yelled at by the YouTube overlords for this one. But when it comes to mounting your suppressor to your firearm, there's a couple different options. There is, of course, direct thread, like my Glock 17 here has a threaded barrel on the end. And then my Osprey suppressor has threads in here inside of the piston to thread onto that barrel. Now, in the case of rifles, you absolutely can do direct thread. That's not a bad option at all. You thread off your, move this over here, you thread off your flash hider or whatever else you have on the end, and then you can thread the suppressor directly onto it. However, I know the lighting isn't super great right here, I apologize for that, but I have a flash hider on the end of my gun here that is a Silencer Co. ASR, and what that means is it basically just interfaces directly with Silencer Co. suppressors that have the adjoining ASR mount on the suppressor itself. And pretty much every suppressor manufacturer has something like this, a muzzle device you can put on all your different guns, and then that muzzle device has the same thread on the outside of it. So you can take your suppressor with a single mount on it and then just swap it between all of your different guns without having to remove muzzle devices or change mounts on the suppressor itself. It's just easy to put it on like that, and then I can take it off, and then I can put it on another one of my guns that has this same flash hider. You can just slip it on. So if you're buying a suppressor from a good manufacturer, they should also offer a similar thing, some kind of quick detach muzzle device that you can put on all your different rifles that you want to use it with, and then it's very easy to move that suppressor around. At the moment, as far as I know, there is not a viable quick detach system like that for pistols. I think Griffin Armament makes one that they market, but as far as I understand, it doesn't work super great. So in the case of a pistol, it will just be always direct thread, where you have to spend all this time threading the suppressor onto your threaded barrel, and then once it's on there, you're ready to shoot and do your thing. Alright, so now that we've got all of what I would consider to be the basic stuff out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about the political landscape around suppressors. Now personally, of course I'm a gun channel, so you guys can probably guess the rough direction that I lean politically, but I don't want to really get super political on this channel. I really just want this channel to be about education and entertainment. But what I'm stating right here is not opinions, it's facts. So we're just going to get into it. If you didn't know, which I would hope you would know if you're interested in guns, but if you didn't know, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to purchase suppressors. Suppressors are regulated under the NFA, which is the National Firearms Act, which basically says they are scary and we don't want people to just be able to go out and buy them easily. So to get a suppressor, you have to do a bunch of paperwork, what's called a Form 4. Basically, you submit a bunch of information, you submit your fingerprints, you submit a picture of yourself, and along with like the serial number of the specific suppressor that you're getting, you have to send that into the ATF. They have to process that paperwork, and then they take $200 from you. And after all that's done, they send you back what's called a tax stamp, and that basically says you're allowed to own this one thing with the matching serial number. You can own that, and then once you get that tax stamp back and lose $200, then you can actually get your suppressor. And in most cases, a quality suppressor like one of these is going to be anywhere from $800 to $1,200. So take the price of the suppressor, add $200 to that, and that's what you're going to be paying to be able to own one of these. So it's not cheap to own a suppressor. There are companies out there that make more affordable suppressors, but you still have to jump through the hoops of getting one and spend the $200 tax. For most people, it's not worth going to all that trouble to just buy a lower quality suppressor. If they're going to go to all that trouble and spend the $200, they want to make sure that they get something that they're going to be happy with forever, because it is such a pain to get one of these in the first place. Now, of course, in the past, there have been bills to challenge this, to try to get suppressors removed from the NFA so that they're not regulated and you can just buy them. Those have never gone anywhere. At time of recording this video, the Hearing Protection Act is going to the Senate, has made it through the House, going to the Senate. I'm personally not hopeful. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. When you're creating a bill that basically tells the government that they are not allowed to continue collecting money from the people in a certain way, it's never going to pass. They're not going to have that. In the past, waiting for a tax stamp used to take a very long time. When I bought my first suppressor, I had to wait 7 months. I submitted the paperwork and then waited 7 months before I got my tax stamp back and was able to take my suppressor home. For the longest time, that was the norm, was you would submit your paperwork, the ATF would be real quick to take your money from you, and then they would just sit on it for months, and you would have to wait 6 months to a year, sometimes even longer, to get your suppressor. Now, recently, that has gotten much, much, much better. I think the ATF wanted to try to do something to get themselves more in favor of the people, which they have done in the past, and yeah. Either way, I think the average wait time for your tax stamp is around a week right now to get your tax stamp back, which is pretty incredible. This suppressor and this suppressor, I waited 4 days, and that was on a trust. Now, talking about trusts, there's 2 ways you can file a Form 4 to get a suppressor. You can do it as an individual, or you can do it through a trust. Now, I'm not going to get into what a trust is, because a trust has been a thing for a long time. It's to do with managing assets, basically. But you can create a trust. There's plenty of websites out there. I highly recommend Capital Armory. They can set you up a trust for like 80 bucks. They do all the legal paperwork and stuff for you. But basically, filing as an individual is exactly that. You just file as yourself. And unfortunately, the ATF keeps a large registry of every suppressor and tax stamp that they process. So when you file as an individual, the ATF has you as a person and the whatever suppressor, short-barreled rifle, whatever you're getting through the Form 4, they have that information. Filing as an individual is usually faster to get your tax stamp back, but of course some people do have reservations about the ATF having that direct information of the person. Now, if you file through a trust, the ATF actually does not see you. They see the trust, an entity. They don't see you as a person. So a lot of people like to file their Form 4s to get a suppressor or whatever through a trust, so that the ATF doesn't have a direct, database of this person owns this thing. Instead, they just see the trust. The other benefit of a trust that I've personally taken advantage of is you can add multiple people to a trust. And anybody on that trust can possess whatever item is on that trust, whether it's a suppressor or a short-barreled rifle. So in my case, I added my dad to a trust so that I could let my dad basically have possession of some of my suppressors. So when he goes out shooting, he goes out hunting, he can use them, and he's very much legally allowed to do that. So those are the 2 big plus sides of a trust, is the ATF doesn't see your name, and you can add multiple people to a trust, and anybody on that trust is legally allowed to use the items on that trust. I say use the items on that trust, that's not really the right wording. If you're out shooting with somebody and you have your suppressors, they can use your suppressors all they want if they're with you. Really, the trust gives the other people legal right to possess those things. You don't need to be around. They can have those things with them and have them on their own personal guns as much as they want. They don't have to have you there with them, basically. Of course, the downside of a trust historically has been that when you file through a trust, you generally have to wait longer. Now, like I said, every can that I have has been done through a trust, and the last 4 suppressors that I've gotten back in a week. So really right now there's no big reason to not do a trust. Something else to keep in mind about a trust is if you get some suppressors and then you add however many people to that trust, If you want to get more suppressors on that trust, after the fact, every person that is on that trust then has to submit pictures and fingerprints along with yourself to get more stuff on that trust. So really, when you do a trust, it's a decide what you want, submit the paperwork with just yourself on the trust, get it back, add other people to that trust, whoever you want to be able to use that stuff, and then that's kind of just there, and you don't touch it anymore. And then if you want to get more stuff in the future, you just set up another trust. But anyway, guys, that is just about everything that I've got for you today. I appreciate you guys watching this video. I hope you learned something. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. I do my best to read all the comments and respond to you guys. Let me know if you have any other input on the use case of suppressors, things like that. Of course, YouTube is not going to like this video. I can almost guarantee this video is going to get demonetized. So any love you guys can show for this video, leaving a like, leaving a comment, is super greatly appreciated. I make this content not to make money, just genuinely because I enjoy doing stuff like this and sharing information with you guys. Any support you guys can show is super greatly appreciated. And of course, thank you guys for watching this video in the first place. And just remember, the Bill of Rights are rules for the government to follow, not us.